Welcome to the Stretch2Go Podcast. My name is Ian Ray, your host. Today I have Sue Hitzmann. She is the founder of the Melt Method, basically the self-tool to taking care of your fascia. Sue, welcome to the Stretch2Go Podcast.
Thank you so much, Ian. Happy to be here with you.
Yes, very, very excited because I know previously, like I said, we're kind of going into this topic of how I found you, why I reached out to you. So I'm a fascia stretch practitioner since July 2024. And when I went to the learning up in Canada, so I went to Canada with Kevin Darby, I remember one of the resources there was, like learning about Stretch2Go, because like fascia is what I do right now as a practice. I remember I wanted to learn more about how to take care of my fascia. And one of the resources there was Melt Method. I was like, what is the Melt Method? So I looked it up. And since Stretch2Go with Chris and Ann, I know they're such great friends with you. You guys go way long ago.
Yeah, they're just icons in the industry.
Yeah. But I remember I actually signed up to be an affiliate because I was like, I want to be an affiliate of Melt Method and I want to learn more. So I signed up right away, and I've gone into this rabbit hole of creating this podcast, and I guess that's where I was like, I need to get Sue on the podcast because I want to hear her story, how she got in, how long she's been doing it, and like obviously like where you and Chris and Ann have crossed paths throughout your whole fascia journey. So please, love for you to introduce yourself briefly about who you are and how the heck did you get into fascia?
Well, yeah, I'm Sue. I don't know how much of the story you want to know, but if I had to give you the short and dirty of it, I've kind of always been obsessed with aging since the age of 11. My great grandmother was this super spry lady, and we would see her every summer. And this one year, I went back to see her, and she wasn't in her house; she was in this convalescent home. And I had never really seen really old people in that way, where I was like, what is wrong with all these people? Like, and I was pulling my cousin away from them, like, don't touch them. Like, something's wrong with these people. And my great grandmother barely remembered who I was, but she put her hands on my cheeks and she gave me a kiss and she whispered, never get old. And when we got into the car, I said to my aunt, what happened to great grandma? And she said, she just got old. And I was like, are you going to get old? She said, yeah. I go, am I going to get old? She said, you are. I go, well, how do you stop that from happening? She's like, there's nothing to that. And so I went home to my mom saying I didn't want any more birthdays. I was done with this aging thing. And I think that what epitomized aging well or fitness and wellness were people like Jack LaLanne and Jane Fonda, which I'm dating myself, but like this is back in the 70s and 80s when fitness was really booming. And so I bit into the idea, if you ate right and you exercised, you were going to live a healthy, active, pain-free life. I got trained in fitness and jazzercise and was kind of always in the fitness realm. I'm an athlete by trade for sure. And I went on to study collegiately. And by my mid-20s, I thought I was like, really very well versed in human movement. I had this knack of getting people out on the field faster. I was working with Jim and Phil Wharton with active isolated stretching and Aaron Mattis. And it really gave me an eye-opening view of how to help people resolve the tension, compression, mismanagement in the body through the musculoskeletal system. And so I really thought I had a knack of everything. And I got into neuromuscular therapy. And then by the time I was 28, I really had a high level, I thought, of proficiency about the body. And one day I woke up and the bottom of my foot hurt me. I thought I stepped on a piece of glass. It was just completely unusual. And I hadn't done anything out of the ordinary. And what started out as foot pain turned into this body-wide ache and fatigue that I could not shake. And what started out as a diagnosis of plantar fasciitis, quite quickly, I was getting brain scans and MRIs to decode what was going on in my body. I had one doctor say, we need to run a blood test because we think it's lupus. And I'm like, lupus? I'm 28 years old. I'm at the peak of my fitness career. And I just like my whole life was just like going downhill. But what the luck of the draw for me was that Google became a thing in the late 90s. And I typed in fascia and 150 sites came up, and about 50 of them were about the human body. And that was really why I got into studying fascia, was that term plantar fasciitis. I had never really heard that term in the late 90s. It wasn't in my field of vision. And I just kept thinking inflamed fascia. Like, there's no exercise for that. How do you fix inflamed fascia? Mm-hmm. And so I went down that rabbit hole to discover fascia and come to find there was an emerging field of neuroscientists and fascial researchers and these rolfers who were trying to uncode not only fascia's role in pain, but fascia's role in aging and longevity and disease. And that's really the start for me in my discoveries of fascia. That was really the start of it.
Do you find like a lot of common people from, that you've interviewed and talked to about fascia, like just people have some kind of a profound impact, whether from injury or like, personal experience really that helped them to propel into this field
Yeah.
of learning more, right? And how to, I guess, heal or to take care of themselves
Yeah,
more.
pretty much every
Yeah. Yeah. Cause I think that's,
absolutely. I think pretty much everyone that I know who is in the industry, most of them discovered something about fascia because of something that was going on in their own bodies, or because the stuff that they had learned wasn't really answering the questions that they had. And I've always had this knack of feeling vibration under the body, under the skin. And in those early years of trying to figure out what fascia really was or how to treat it, my friend Alec Hellner was like, "Oh, you should go take Gil Hadley's dissection course. He does a layer by layer dissection." And I'm like, "Layer by layer of what?" And he goes, "Fascia." I'm like, "What? What do you mean he's dissecting the fascia? Like you just chuck that stuff in the bucket to get to the good stuff. Like he's dissecting? What are you talking about?" And he really, Gil Hadley absolutely changed the course of my career, the course of my curiosity. And he also introduced me to all of these pioneering researchers. And I got taken under the wing of Tom Findley, who helped me with my first research study. Robert Schleip has been very instrumental. And you had said Chris and Ann Frederick. I think I met them. I want to say it was at the Ulm fascia camp, and that had to have been, I don't even know how long ago, but it's maybe 15 years ago or something like that. And, it was one of the first ones that they had was a conference for fascia. And there were maybe about 30 of us there. And Chris and Ann Frederick were one of that group. Maybe this might be back in 2008, because I think 2007 is when we had the very first Fascia Research Congress. I think I met Chris and Ann after that, and shortly thereafter. So we've always been colleagues and friends. I can't even remember. And to be honest with you, I just think when you get to a particular age, all of the years between 2005 and 2025 just blur together as a stream. I can't really remember.
yeah. No, that's awesome. So to explain simply for my audience and to your audience, obviously, but what is the melt method that you came up with? What was it that inspired you to create this self-care of the fascia?
Yeah, that actually, it actually spawned out of my private practice. So melt is a simple self-care technique that basically simulates the light touch therapeutic intervention that was part of my practice, starting with craniosacral, visceral manipulation, lymph drainage, and also neuromuscular therapy. And it actually emerged because of a single client who had chronic migraines, TMJ, and neck pain, who came to see me. And after I treated her just with my hands, she went home, and for 3 days, she didn't have a migraine. And she called me and she was like, "I don't know what it is that you've done, but I've never gone 3 days without a migraine in a decade. I'm coming back." And I said, "Okay." So I was seeing her twice a week. And after about a month, she would go about a week and no migraines, but she would always come back saying she could feel it was coming. And I said to her, "It's got to be something in your environment." And her exact words to me were, "If you could invent a way for me to do to myself what you do with your magic hands, I'd stay out of your office once and for all." And I really thought like, wow, I'd be unemployed if that works. That sounds like a miracle if I could. So I started experimenting with balls and rocks and rollers. And I came up with this idea of taking PVC piping. I wrapped it in bubble wrap. I wrapped it in a yoga blanket and a yoga mat, and I duct taped the thing together. So it had softness like my hands would. It would be more of a gentle pressure. And I started doing these techniques on my skull, and I decompressed my neck, and I knew I did it. I gave it to Donna. And then she went from going a week to 10 days to 15 days to 20 days. And then she was able to stay out of my office. And she said to me, "This is a miracle. If you could invent a way for my husband to get a better golf game and help his back so that he'd stop complaining that he can't golf because of his back pain." And that was it. And it just became an experimental time from about 1999 until 2004. And at that point, I had worked on thousands of people. My practice exploded. I was seeing about 50 people a week. And I just came up with this notion. I thought maybe I could teach people how to do this in a group environment because I keep teaching everybody the same kind of thing. And if I could explain this well enough to one person, maybe I could explain it to a group. And that's really where it started. And in 2004, I coined the term MELT. I had it trademarked. It first stood for myofascial energetic length technique. It was an acronym. And then after 4 more years of teaching in group, it really transformed. And then I was like, I'm going to write a book. And so I wrote a book, and 2013, the book came out. I was teaching instructors how to teach this in group environments, and the book became a New York Times bestseller. And today I've got 2 best-selling books. I've got about 3,800 instructors worldwide who teach the method. And it's a very gentle approach that uses soft therapy balls and rollers. And now we have the Fascia Hydrator to help people not only rehydrate fascia, but to help the nervous system regain balance in the stress and repair regulators.
Crazy. I can't imagine like how much fulfillment
It
you
is a little
had.
crazy.
Yeah. Just how much fulfillment you had in helping your client overcome that and self-caring and to take care of herself just through what you did.
It was so amazing. I mean, that was it. It was after you start working on one person and you're making all of these changes, person after person, and then developing a language and developing techniques where I didn't even have to touch anybody. I could just talk them through a treatment. And then the cool thing about MELT is the basic protocol, which is to assess your body for stuck stress and fascia, which is what we call this mishap between tension compression management and fascia. And then treat yourself and then right away reassess and notice if you can feel the change. Because the thing I know about people in pain is that the problem is they can't change themselves. So I think MELT is really an interruption that gives people an opportunity to really come back home, to attune themselves to sensory presence, to really be in the present moment with their self-care, to not be so worried about the past or what happened to them, why they got injured, or worry about what their future is going to be like because they have this injury, but to be really present because that's the place where everything changes. And yeah, I mean, it's really transformative. It's really kind of an amazing thing to see people feel their bodies change from one point to the next in a class and walk out of there saying, God, I feel so much more in my body than I came into class feeling. And I think that's a miracle.
Explain to me as far as who are the type of people that first, I guess, were attracted to the MELT method? Were they mostly yoga practitioner, craniosacral therapists? I mean, or all different walks of life? I guess who are the first people that kind of started using the MELT method?
Yeah, the people that we're working with at first were just people who were in pain who were coming to my office. I always felt like if somebody was coming to me, it's because they really had exhausted their resources. They've tried medicine, they tried massage, they tried their acupuncturist, and then they would show up at my door and I'd oftentimes see things that somebody was missing or they had been told something and really it may or may not have been true. I think it really injured people who were suffering with a pain point that was not resolving. And it didn't matter what place on the spectrum they were with, acute traumatic injuries to what I call sudden chronic pain, which is that kind of pain that you like, you go to sleep perfectly healthy and you wake up and you can't turn your head to the right for a week, as well as chronic issues that are a side effect of a disorder or a disease. Second to that are people probably 50 and over who are feeling the effects of aging and are not aging well. And then third to that are younger 20 to 40-year-olds who are realizing that their repetitive lifestyle is getting in the way of them feeling optimal.
I find that myself, the repetitive changing my behavior from sitting a lot or just my posture, those type of things that I guess subliminally I don't think about, but it still affects the way that my fascia forms and holds me. So I guess that's one thing I've always looked into as far as like how fascia does affect in our day-to-day life, knowing that I'm working with people on the table, but also myself. I need to also learn to work with my fascia and obviously try to, hydrate it and to feed it well. kind of explain to us? I know you have products, some of your melt method products. I'd love to learn, like, as far as, because there's the hand and foot therapy that you have with the balls. You have your foam roller, and then of course the fascia hydrator. Kind of let's go those three as far as what they would be used for. I know this is part of your melt method that people who are interested would go and to learn about online and of course to take care, but I just want to kind of get a snippet of what people were to expect. So go ahead.
Yeah. So the hand and foot therapy kit, the hand and foot therapy is really the foundation. When I had a lot of pain, what I really kind of was the aha spark for me was realizing, where do we take sensory information in? And the majority of what we take in information is through our hands and feet. They're not just endpoints, they're really sensory portals. So it's the one place everybody misses in treatment. Most people don't ever treat their hands or feet, but you have more nerves communicating to your brain from your hands and feet than anywhere else in your body, because this is where you have all these joints, right? So your hands and feet and the sensory reception that occurs is the primary point of entry. So we basically teach people how to use these soft tools with 5 compression techniques: position point pressing, gliding, shearing, rinsing, and friction. All of them are yielding either hydration changes or neurological adaptation to stimulate the sensory nervous system. We also use a soft roller. Everybody has seen a foam roller. Foam rollers have been around for a long time. When I developed that roller, there were no soft rollers on the market. My roller was the first soft therapy roller from a company called OPTP. They developed this roller with me. And the principle of using not only a soft roller, but a roller that has texture so that you can really pin the skin and create grip, just like you would with a therapist, right? That fascia is responsive to 2 things: tension and compression. So if you create tension through organized myofascial tension, myofascial meridians, or you compress in organized way, it's kind of like working fluid into a sponge. And so a more gentle compression technique of glide shearance is one of the things we use with the roller. We have something called the 4 R's of melt: reconnect, rebalance, rehydrate, and release. And we basically teach people how to reconnect to their bodies, assess their bodies, quiet down the nervous system, decrease the stress response, rebalance the neurological regulators that stabilize our masses over our spaces when we stand up, rehydrate our fascia, and decompress the primary or release the primary spaces of our hands, feet, neck, and low back. And then our newest tool is the Fascia Hydrator. And this device was actually created by Christopher Gordon. He is a naturopath, physiotherapist, and osteopath in Germany. And he and I had met up about 15 years ago. And Tom Findlay, thank you, Tom Findlay, who is no longer here, who introduced us and said, you two have to get together because you guys speak the same language and you're out there for the same intent, which is to really help people. And so he had another product before this, and that device didn't have the texture on it. And so after some conversations with him, I said, you got to produce another one that has texture so that you can really pin and create the shear effect that you're looking for. Lo and behold, here comes this product. And so we are now collaborating with him at the US market to bring this out there. This device has 40, 70, 90 hertz and an oscillating frequency. Each one is designed to do different things to the body, primarily stimulate the lymphatic system, stimulate the fluid perfusion of fascia, and to help create that fluid induction around joints where we tend to lose it the most. So this is a nice complement to the basic melt practice, because a lot of our clients who are either overweight, in a lot of pain, or older had a hard time getting down on the ground to do the compression techniques. So the nice thing about the Fascia Hydrator is one of the 4 R's of melt, rehydrate. You can do the rehydrate techniques, the glide, shear, rinse with the Fascia Hydrator. And actually you make faster changes with less effort. And I think that's good for, sadly, lazy America, who is maybe looking for that quicker fix and not really willing to right away invest time in really learning how to adopt a self-care practice using a soft therapy roller. So that's been our we just launched that this last month, and it's gone kind of like gangbusters. People are really on board because we did a pilot study of about 300 people, and the results have been unbelievable. Everything from improved sleep, weight loss, digestive improvements, joint mobility is better, their stability has improved. And the other side of our business is neurostrength, which is what my second book was about, is about neurological reintegration and repatterning techniques. And for people who have joint pain, oftentimes it's really hard to get them to do any type of strength-based work. But if you stimulate the joint with the fascia hydrator and then you reinstate activation of the muscle, the nervous system seems to pick up the patterns much faster because you're changing the brain's connection to the periphery. And I think that that's just super exciting. So I'm really excited about what the results are with the study.
I know, I think it's just the way that we are as far as like the sedentary lifestyle. This does seem to help, I guess, the entry point for people to start thinking about taking care of their body. So that is a great tool because yes, they could probably use like a, percussion gun or one of those targeted vibration tools. But, it seems like this tool it's such a different and it's hitting because I think I was reading it hits that superficial layer of the fascia, right?
Exactly. That's
Hmm.
it. Like the percussion guns,
Hmm.
percussion is a very, very different thing than low frequency vibration. This is really, really low. Like I don't even think you could hear it if I put it up here. It's
Yeah.
so low, right? There's the second one. I don't know if you can even hear
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a really low frequency. What I'm compelled with, and something that's always fascinated me, is between the superficial fascia and the deep fascia, there's what Gill would call perifascia, where a lot of the fluid matrix is really in motion in those
Hmm.
layers. And for a lot of us, those areas get a little bit tacked down because we have these repetitive postures and movement. And this really stimulates it. And also in your superficial fascia, you've got a lot of lymph, a lot of lymphocytes in there, and also hormones that have been unabsorbed, which I think is one of the exciting things that we were seeing in some of the women. They were like, wow, I really felt like I had a boost of energy and mobility. And I think, well, that might actually be like you might have unused estrogen living in your superficial fascia, the estrogen, the estradiol, estriol, of course. And so moving that through your body is going to get back into the bloodstream and help you regulate your hormones, your metabolic system, you right, and in your nervous system.
Hmm.
So I think percussion guns have a time and a place, but I think oftentimes that is like it's almost at the absolute opposite side of where I am because I come from a very light touch, gentle therapeutic intervention rather than thinking I need to beat my body into submission to make it change. And I know that you probably get that idea is like when people have a neck pain, the first thing they want to do is take like a blunt object and jam it right into their neck or, put that percussion gun right where it hurts, like you're going to beat it into submission. But I
Hmm.
always say, the areas that are screaming out for our help, if you had a kid that was screaming out for your help, you wouldn't walk up to them and assault them. You wouldn't punch them in the face, right? You'd get down at their level, you calm them down, you tell them everything's going to be okay. And then you get information. You say, now tell me what happened. And they tell you information and then you would take action. But when our bodies hurt, our first inclination is to beat the crap out of our system to will it to stop. And that is not the way that the body really reacts and responds. If you're in a stress state, I don't think the first thing you should do is put more stress on top of a stress system. The first thing you should do is try to calm the crap down a little bit, just bring it down on the down low,
Yeah.
breathe a little bit better, right? And so we do a lot of breath work in melt. The rebalancing techniques really go after diaphragmatic motion and helping the nervous system. Because one thing I do know about fascia is fascia, you can't talk about it in a silo. I think fascia is very fashionable right now. Everybody's talking about fascia like, you're going to fix your fascia. And I think, well, you got to put something in front of fascia. Like, is it neurofascia? Is it visceral
Uh-huh.
fascia? Are you talking about serous fascia? Like, what fascia are you talking about? And do you really even know what you're talking about? Is my come from. I think that there's a lot of buzzwords out there, and I think that there's just a good handful of real educators who kind of understand the complexities of the extracellular matrix on a microscopic scale.
Hmm.
What fascia is doing for us beyond just supporting our muscles and bones and myofascia.
Yeah. Gosh, yeah, sorry, thank you. That's what I wanted to kind of hit on because even like percussion therapy, like you're compressing the fascia, the muscles, and I guess if you're in pain, you don't want to compress that. You want to release it to give it some space, right? So like what you're doing is like Yeah, I mean, I guess when I'm thinking about percussion therapy or any type where you are putting pressure on that fascia, it's not what it needs. It's releasing it and to give it some space so that it can to breathe and to move. I find that most people who are in, like, say, high stress jobs, they need to have some kind of release. And I think that's one thing I want to get into, as well as like in your practice, because you did craniosacral, correct?
Yeah.
That is such a missing link in my practice, because I know when I'm doing the FST in my work, I think that's typically where I end my session, is just releasing and to calm that nervous system, to bring that body back into a rest state so that they can go out. And kind of tell me, like, how does that work with the craniosacral therapy, as far as like what the melt method includes with the craniosacral, I guess.
Well, I mean, craniosacral therapy is really, at the fundamental level, is really about the motion of the cerebral spinal fluid, and in their in the fundamentals of it. But as you go through some of the levels of training, depending upon who your teachers are, you just realize that there's more to the subtle body energies that exist on a frequency, on a level of motion. Again, when we think about fascia and mobilizing fascia, or, there's lots of people who are, really into, like, they're going to change the collagen matrix. And I'm like, well, collagen is kind of slow to change, but the fluid in fascia is very quick to adapt. You can actually get fluid motion, but you got to slow down. And I think cranial sacral therapy really helped me to get more quiet with my clients. And one of my teachers, Gail Wexler, I was in an advanced level doing a technique, and I was having trouble with it. And she came over, and I went to go put my hands on the client, and she said, "Don't project." I said, "Don't project? What do you mean, don't project?" She goes, "Don't put your hands on somebody to do anything. Just listen. Just palpate, don't manipulate, feel and follow, don't initiate." And I think one thing I would say to anybody, if you're a practitioner listening to this, is I think when our clients come in, a lot of the practitioners just get to work. They just
Hmm.
start doing that protocol that they know. But I think what cranial sacral therapy and visceral, Jean Barrel's visceral manipulation, really changed my my way of entering with a client, creating a relationship. So slowing down and listening to them, listening to the cadence of their speech when they first come in, watching their body language, getting them on the table and just watching them breathe and noticing where the breath goes, and then putting my hands on them to listen, to do what they call local listening. And then, of course, to see if they're in the present moment, or are they instantly talking about what happened last week, last month, last year, 5 years ago, right? If they're in the past, and try to get them into the present moment with me. Or if the second that they lie down, they're practically unconscious, meaning that their stress state is so high that the second they lie down, they're like catatonic, right? They're just so exhausted, they go unconscious. And so learning a little bit about that, I think that those light touch therapies get practitioners a little more quiet. And I think that when we talk about fascia, while I get it, everybody again is a myofascial expert. Everybody's talking about the myofascial system. And I caution them to that, because I think we have a language problem there. But fascia in and of itself is a subtle body energy. It possesses frequency. It possesses flow. It has neuroelectrochemical adaptations. It has charge to it. And again, I think craniosacral therapy really speaks to that gentle entry of putting your hands on someone else and then blending with that energy, and then feeling what you feel, and then feeling and following the rhythm. And does it have as much inspire as expire? Is it moving sequentially? Does it seem to fill up more than it comes down? And then can we, through light touch intervention, regulate that? And the principle of cranial work is that if you can regulate the cerebral spinal flow and get it back to balance, most of the other substances and systems of the body kind of follow along with that. And I think that in some ways that has a lot of merit to it. But I think that fascia can possess that same adaptation and transformation. And you don't need to know how to do craniosacral therapy to do it.
Okay. Thank you. No, thanks for the explanation. Like I said, I've looked into craniosacral as part of my practice, and so I was just really intrigued that you had that background. I know
Yeah.
you were, I guess the one of the founders, I want to say, of the Fascia Research Congress. Is that correct?
I am. I am one of the first 10 founding members of the Fascia Research Society before we
Yeah.
called it that. Tom Findlay, who was the founder with Robert Schleip. Yep. They started this, and Gil Hadley, myself, and another handful of colleagues invested money, and we founded it. And then I think we brought in 100 in the first year. And now we just had our seventh International Fascia Research Congress. And I think it was the best one yet, where we're really bringing clinicians and practitioners and scientists together to make headway with the fascial science.
What was the I guess what was the inspiration in bringing this together? Is it just because of the many research that has been done on fascia that needs to be put together, or what was the idea behind this Fascia Research Society?
Originally it was Tom Findlay had this moment where he just said, we need to get clinicians and researchers together to share their work. And so what we want to do is try to get some of the researchers that are actually studying fascia together and share it with everyone. And I remember when he had said that, it was kind of like crickets for about 40 seconds. And then Tom Myers was on the phone and he goes, I just want to make sure I heard you right, Tom. You want researchers to share their unpublished research and their theories. And he goes, exactly. But in that, though, there are research papers that are being published and we need to get out in front of that. And so he somehow or other, I think with Helen Langevin, I think she was really the entry person into Harvard University, and they presented it at Harvard University. And that's where we got to see Dr. J.C. Gumberto's work on strolling under the skin and some of these real pioneers who have really paved the way for people like me and Anne and Chris to bring our clinical side and our clinical know-how and take that science and try to convert it into an actual application.
That is so cool. That is so cool to be part of that. I mean, I know I've heard of, so many people I've had on the podcast who are, fascia, I guess who've been working with fascia or sharing about information in fascia and how much they've gained knowledge, and they were looking forward to it because of the, pioneers of Fascia Research Society, like, Dr. Robert Schleip and Tom Myers and whatnot, and yourself, like just learning that because you guys have that experience, you guys have the expertise behind to really help people like myself to learn it and make it really simple and applicable to our practice.
That's the game. I mean, if it's hard, I mean, that's it. Is if things are difficult, it's very confusing, it's too scientific, people don't listen. And that was actually what happened to me when I had learned so much about fascia. And when I was like, I'm going to tell everybody about this. And when I first started teaching MELT as a class, I was literally bringing strips of cow fascia into the classroom, trying to explain glycoaminoglycans and proteoglycans. And everybody just looked at me like, I don't even know where you got that fascia. And I was like, oh no, it's just from the butcher. I mean, I didn't like kill a cow or a person or anything. They're like, I don't even understand why this is relevant. Just teach me the techniques. And my language was too scientific. And it took me years to simplify my mind down and the terms down into words that people could understand. Like even when you talk about the autonomic nervous system, people are like, is that like, how many nervous systems are there? And I'm like, well, there's only one nervous system, but we cut it up to explain it. Think of it like the autopilot part of your body. And they were like, I understand autopilot. Use that word. Don't use autonomic nervous system. Too technical, too many words. Same thing, proprioception. People don't really understand proprioception or interoception or exteroception or nociception, sensory reception, right? That's sensory reception, all of those. We call that body sense, right? So if you want to really teach people about fascia, you can get all super technical, and now everybody's very quantum about it, quantum biology when we describe it, because it has a quantum nature to it, but if that's the way you're explaining it to your clients, you're actually stressing themselves out more. You're stressing them out more, trying to understand what you're saying. But if you say to them, look, if you hurt, your nervous system is under duress. And what supports, protects, and stabilizes the nervous system is your fascial system. They're kind of like a power couple. Everybody's very enamored with the big one, with the nervous system. But unless you look at the fascia and how its role works in embryology, these two systems co-evolved. Fascia and the nervous system co-evolved to create life. So they're really, you can't separate them. So it can't just be the fascia and it can't just be the nervous system. It can't just be any one thing in the body, quite frankly. I like my friend Perry Nicholson says, everybody who says that it's like this one thing that's your problem is the one problem. You know what I mean? Is that it can't just be one thing. It's all connected. And so there's
Yeah.
always more than one problem. If you have adrenal fatigue, you probably have an endocrine problem and a metabolic dysregulation, right? If you have digestive problems, same thing, right? There's a connection between your gut, your metabolism, your nervous system, your fascial system. It's all connecting to keep you thriving and alive, and we should respect those systems and support them.
Where do you see the way that fascia is evolving in the future today from your perspective? Where do you see fascia evolving? Do you think there's going to be more research coming out? More people are going to make this a mainstream, or like it's going to be make it to where people understand the importance of fascia?
I think it's going to be. I think that over time this will be even more well known, and I've been saying that for a long time. I can tell you, we had said off camera that I found all this old footage of me talking about fascia, and I think it was like 2012 before I even had the book. I had the opportunity to present at Penn State University, and the anatomy professor basically told me I was full of shit and that like everything I was purporting was like fabricated. And I'm like, this is research. Like, I'm just proposing research. Here's the research. And he didn't want to say it. And I finally just said, you just sound like a lazy professor who's working on tenure and you don't want to change your curriculum because, it's easier just to do the same tests and read from the same books that I was reading from. So I do think that fascia will become more and more studied because of atomic force microscopy, because of these high powered micron microscopes, and from the curious minds that want to know. I think that, yeah, we are going to continue to uncover more and more about fascia and its role in things like lymphedema, lipedema, cancer, fibrotic diseases, metastasis. Fascia is playing a role in all of those things. And I think that the more we're able to view the extracellular matrix with these high powered microscopes, the more we're understanding the link of the extracellular matrix and what's going on inside of the cell. Because inside the cell, you have these like microfilaments and these this way of communication, these fibers and fluids and the microtubules that are in the cells are pushing against the extracellular matrix. And what's interesting is that when you look at fascia under a microscope and you look at the extracellular matrix, it almost looks, collagen presents itself kind of like the same thing, these microfilaments. And so it's a mirror between the two. And I think that this is super exciting to understand when you think about that polarity and relationships are really important to all of life. There's nothing living in a silo. I said that before. So really realizing that the microtubules in the neurons that are where consciousness is arising may be a reflection of the extracellular matrix imprinting itself inside the cell. So I think that the more we get neuroscientists and fascial researchers together, the more we're going to uncover that. And actually, in my podcast, The Anatomical Gangster, I had the honor of chatting with Stuart Hameroff, J.C. Gumberto, John Sharkey, and Carol Davis in a conversation about consciousness and the dance of microtubules. So I think that, yes, 100% is the short answer from that long answer. I don't think we're even remotely scratching the surface as to what we're going to uncover by looking at the extracellular matrix more closely.
Hey, man, full of knowledge, full of gems. Thank you. I'd love to invite you to share how people can learn more about what you're doing, how they can reach out to, interact, and of course, learn more about the MELT method or even become an instructor. So where can they find you to learn more about and of course, interact? So if you want to share your social media, email, website, and any way that they can contact and of course, follow your podcast.
Yeah. So, the fastest way to learn about MELT is to go to meltmethod.com. There you can find thousands of instructors. You can click on find an instructor. There might actually be an instructor that is teaching classes that you had no idea 5 miles away from where you live. There you can also learn a little bit more about the products and the tools. I write blogs very often. I'm just an educator by heart. So I'm always feeding out information. Very active on social media, on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on Facebook, on TikTok. You're going to find Melt Method, and you'll also find SueHitzmann.com, and I'm there as well. Easy to connect with me. We do events, retreats. We actually have one more retreat this year coming up in Costa Rica, and we do teacher trainings every few months. And the entry level is the hand and foot. It's a 30-day online course. There's a lot of guidance that goes down with that. And I'm going to be doing some master classes for the Fascia Hydrator. One is October 30th, and then I'm doing another one in November and another one in December. And so if you really just want to connect, you want to ask questions, you want to experience it with me live, that's another opportunity. But I'm super accessible. I'm always out there to help everybody. So, if you got a real question or something's, you want to ask me directly, they can connect with me on Instagram easy.
Perfect. Well, I appreciate you, Sue, for being on the podcast today. And of course, don't forget everyone to follow the Anatomical Gangster podcast, where you release, how often do you release your podcast? Every week?
Once a week. Yeah. Once a week. And it's on YouTube, Spotify. You find it anywhere you find your podcasts.
Okay. Perfect. Yeah. Same likewise for myself. So, I'm just really blown away of the vast knowledge and of course, just information I was able to gather from you. And of course, just seeing from afar how exciting it is for you and the Melt Method to continue to grow and to really help people to really work on their fascia to self-care. So thank you again for hopping onto the podcast.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, Ian.
Yes, you're welcome. All right. Thanks, everyone. Awesome. Appreciate it.